Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Stormkeep. My name is Paul, and today I'm joined by Dan and Mergonk,
Hey, it's Dan here.
Hey, it's Morgonk.
and we are throwing a quick video here at you today. We are going to talk about why you should use Tempestors, because we have been having a lot of success with them in this season. We're going to break down why and what makes this unit quite different from other units in our book. So first up, I guess we got to answer the question, why not just use Fulminators, right? Because Fulminators are fantastic damage. They're, I think, the best damage output in the game, point for point. It could be another unit out there, but they're really high up there. They're phenomenal damage. Everybody knows how impactful Fulminators are. So why use Tempestors? I guess that's the question we're here to answer.
I think I get this question like 3 times a day in the Discord.
I've heard this question a lot too. Luckily, I've managed to convince a few of my podcast locals exactly why they're good, but let's find out for everyone else.
Yeah, let's explore.
First and foremost, I think people making the comparison between Tempestor and Fulminator are on the wrong track. I don't think these two units are comparable. Comparable, however you want to pronounce that. Tempestors actually are just a different role than Fulminators. Fulminators are the point them at the thing you want to die, charge them into combat, hit the thing, and it dies. That's exactly what Fulminators do, and they're very good at it. But there's a lot more nuance to the game than just charging stuff into melee. Maybe if you're an Iron Jaws player, that sounds like heresy, but I swear it's true. There's more to the game than that.
I like the Fulminator.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Fulminators, I mean, it does what it says on the box, right? Like, it's point and click almost.
They fulminate. That's what they do.
Yeah.
But Tempestors aren't just a melee hammer unit. They're better. You're better off thinking of them as like a mobile gun platform that runs around alongside cavalry, shoots stuff, protects flanks, peppers in damage, and then when it needs to, it can charge in to deal a finishing blow. So this is really similar. I'm sure people have played against the Ideneth Alapexes. They're flying sharks that zoom around with their hooks, their harpoon guns. They shoot you a whole bunch of times, and then they charge in and try to finish you off that way. Tempestors are very similar to that. I think they're more efficient in terms of damage output, in terms of wounds per point, and things like that. So they're like a better version of Alapexes, in addition to having a 3+ save and doing mortal wounds. But they're slower and they have a lower threat range. So trade-offs there. So I wouldn't consider, if you're building an Ideneth list, for example, you wouldn't compare Reavers and Sharks against each other. They're just different units. They fill different roles and you use them in different ways. And in that same vein, you wouldn't compare Fulminators to Tempestors because they're just different units. They do different things. One of them is a mobile shooting unit, and the other one is just a straight up hammer unit. And Tempestors actually do good shooting damage too. They don't have to charge in order to get any value out of them. Like if you don't charge with Fulminators, they do nothing. And then you've got points there. You've got an expensive screen that's ready to take damage from your opponent. So Tempestors, they still get value even when they're not charging in, and their defensive profile is exactly the same as Fulminators. Arguably better because of Unleash Hell. So, and if you want a full breakdown of how their damage looks compared to our other shooting units, go check out episode number 27 of the podcast. We actually break down all of our different shooting units, and we included Tempestors in there, and you can see that they do comparable damage to things like Bow Judicators. They're actually about 20% stronger than Bow Judicators on average, which is crazy to think about because they're so similar in terms of cost. Tempestors are a great shooting unit all on their own. And then you add in their melee damage, and they just look even better.
Yeah, they're a really, really cool unit in that they're. It's strange to find good hybrid units in the game because much like, for example, Vigilors, you see them like they're supposed to be a hybrid unit, but they're just not executed well. And Tempestors this season, it surprised me because looking at the War Scroll, just looking at it from the beginning, we didn't rate them as highly before. And since we've been taking a bigger look, I mean, we've been probably saying this for a while now, a couple months now, but more seriously than ever in our new list builds this season, you'll notice Tempestors pop up more. And it's with good reason, and I'm really excited to explore this.
I'm really excited to explore this post Thunderbolt Volley because, now it's a time where their shooting can actually come into its own and kind of almost like be toe to toe with other shooting units in our arsenal.
Yeah, when Thunderbolt Volley used to work on reinforced units, all of our picks for lists were, okay, well, here's 6 Raptors or here's 15 Judicators, and then what do we fill the list with? And in that paradigm, using a block of 4 Tempestors was way too expensive, or using 2 squads of 2 Tempestors was too expensive. But now that we're sometimes just bringing 3 Raptors only for Volley, and then comboing that with other shooting units to make up the difference, they're actually looking pretty good just as squads of 2 or 4. A question we get all the time is how do I magnetize the arms on my Drekoth? Well, it's actually a really, really easy kit to magnetize. I highly recommend everybody does this. All you need is a hand drill, a couple of magnets on either side, some super glue, and this is like one of the easiest kits to ever magnetize. The arm bits are completely independent of each other. For a full guide on how to magnetize it, just check out our Discord server in the Stormfact channel. We have a full guide in there, including photos and sizing for magnets and everything. So check it out. Taking a look real quick at the damage comparison between Fulminators and Tempestors, just to get an idea of you're spending 10 points less when you take Tempestors, but how much are you really giving up in terms of melee damage? So this is a quick table here. You can see the standard profile. This is no bonuses to hit, no bonuses to wound, just as it shows on the War Scroll, 3s and 3s, Ren 2, 3 damage when charging on Fulminators. The Tempestors block there, you can see they do obviously not as much damage as Fulminators. They're never going to do as much damage as Fulminators, not in shooting, not in a combination of shooting and melee, but they do respectable damage. Like against a 3+ save, only 2 Fulminators will do about 9 damage to the 3+ save, and that is fine for a 220-point unit that can be battle line. Now, obviously, Fulminators do more, but you can have both. You can bring both of these units. So it's just to give you an idea of roughly how much damage the Tempestors do. They do about 2/3 of the damage of Fulminators when you combine their shooting and their melee.
Mm-hmm. And noting this chart is including the Fulminator's breath. So
yes.
we didn't leave out the full profile. Like, this is everything on the board here, so you can see how close it really is. Like, obviously, Fulminators do more damage. You can't.
Very few things in our, but that's the thing. Very few things in our army do as much damage as Fulminators. So that is the highest bar of damage that we talk.
Nothing does more damage than Fulminators. Nothing does more. So that's not the point of this comparison. It's not to say, oh, look, they do as much. No, it's like they do 2/3 as much as Fulminators, and that's good.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Yeah. That's a high amount of damage. And then taking a look at the bottom table, you can see when you have them in Bounty Hunters and you're fighting enemy veteran units, which is a thing in Season 1, then Tempestors are actually doing a lot of damage when you combine their shooting and their melee. So against a 4+ save or a 5+ save, which seems to be the most common profile for veteran units these days, is 4+ saves, then they're doing about 15 damage. Just 2 Tempestors charging in against veterans deal 15 damage. Very good. When you bring a squad of 4 Tempestors, that goes up to 30 damage, which is a lot.
Crazy. That's crazy good.
And that's with no bonuses to hit, no bonuses to wound, no bonuses to rend, no exploding 6s. This is just what's on the War Scroll. So that is a lot of damage. Tempestors are a threat your opponent has to respect. They can't just be ignored.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a look at some pros and cons for Tempestors, because it's not all great. We're talking about how good they are, but there are some downsides. But let's look at the pros first. So first up, they do have good damage. Their shooting is good, and after shooting, they can get into melee combat, unlike most of our other shooting units, which just exclusively shoot. Like Long Strikes never want to be in melee. Judicators never want to be in melee. These guys are fine with it. They can go in there and finish stuff off. And sometimes, you're a few points short. And because of your decision making, you have your shooting phase and then you have your charge phase. So you don't have to charge in if you don't want to. But sometimes you're faced with the decision where, like, yeah, you know what, it makes sense for me to charge in and kill some more stuff. Deal those last couple points of damage that I need. Mm-hmm. And this becomes really important when you consider how the game flows. If you're just shooting things off an objective, then you can't contest that objective on the same turn because you can't move after shooting typically. However, if you have a unit like Tempestors, they can shoot something, charge in to finish it off, and as they're charging, they're moving onto the objective, claiming that territory, and taking it away from your opponent. So that's a very, very useful niche for a shooting unit to have. Most shooting units in the game don't do this. When they get to both shoot and fight, they're very efficient, and they are also very good with any bonuses. There's bonuses to wound with Celestial Blades or with the Triumph. You can give them a Triumph to give them +1 to wound in the shooting phase. If you have a block of 4, that's a pretty good use of it. There's a Purple Sun out there. I'm sure people have heard of this spell. It's kind of getting popular.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, so if you have bonuses to rend effectively, reducing enemy save rolls, then Tempestors look better and better because their rend 1-shots can go up to rend 2, rend 3, or effectively even rend 4, as we'll show very soon. And they're pretty fast. relatively. Like, we always talk 10 inches isn't very fast in this game. It's not fast for a melee unit, but for a shooting unit, 10 inches is spectacular. That's really good movement for a shooting unit. The fact that it can charge into melee afterwards is just icing on the cake. At only 220 points, it actually feels really easy to slot these guys into lists, especially when they're battle line in Hammers of Sigmar. You can very easily find room for these guys in a list. They don't need a screen because they are more durable than most of our other shooting units. They have a 3+ save as opposed to a 4+ save. 200 points of Judicators will get you typically 10 wounds. These guys are 12. So they're a little bit more durable. They don't need screening. So you don't have to consider putting Liberators in front of them like you would with our other shooting units. So they're really
scarier Unleash.
They have a fantastic Unleash Hell because their combination of mortal wounds from the breath and the crossbows will do a lot of damage. So you have a squad of 4 of these guys. Unleash Hell is going to do a ton of damage. It's almost like you get to fight first with them. It's really potent. And then you can all-out defense react when they charge into you, and then fight them on your turn. So they're a great defensive kind of anvil unit. They can also be a hammer. They kind of do a little bit of everything, and they do it all really well. And they're also not a veteran, which means they don't take bonus damage from bounty hunters. So if your opponent is charging in with a bunch of, let's say, relatively weak units, like let's say they're charging in with Storm Drake Guard, who are pretty poor damage unless they're fighting against veteran units with bounty hunters, well, these guys aren't veterans, so the bounty hunter bonus won't trigger on them. So it's actually worth giving these guys save bonuses. You can give them Mystic Shield, you can give them All-Out Defense, you can give them a Castellan Lantern on a block of 4. That's really, really tough to shove.
Yeah, I really like the like we have note there on there, no taxes required. They don't need synergies to function, which is super cool about showing them in lists. I think that's a big pro for them. Is a lot of our units want other things to help them out, and Tempestors don't necessarily need that.
Yeah, you don't have to bring anything to make this unit good. Just on their baseline, as you saw, only fighting against veterans with no bonuses to a hit or wound or anything, they're still doing good damage.
Actually, I really like that point because with a Fulminator, or in the rare case someone does take a concuss, I always feel myself wanting a Synergies of Sigmar Battle Mage to just increase that little bit of movement, either with Steadfast March or Lord Relictor to help out. Tempestors just feel very independent. They feel like I can drop them from Scions if I want. I can start them on the board and just advance them to midfield and start shooting. And they generate value in 2 phases. So it never feels like they didn't do anything. Like 220 points worth of Tempestors didn't do anything.
Yeah,
Most of the time, they will generate some value.
Yeah, it takes 2 all-out defenses to negate all of their damage.
Yeah.
And they're the kind of unit that it's not obvious that your opponent needs to deal with them as quickly as possible, because they're not this super high impact unit like Long Strikes or Fulminators, which your opponent will target first. So those units are going to die, and your Tempestors are going to survive and get multiple turns of value. Now, there are some downsides. Obviously, we're talking about how good Tempestors are, but they're not a veteran. And I know it's weird that I said that's a pro, but it's also a bad thing because they can't contest Proving Grounds. And when you're spending this many points, like 220 points, it's like, oh, okay, the rest of my list better have some veterans, because if you just can't contest Proving Grounds at all, you're going to have a rough time in this season. Not being able to score objectives can set you very far behind, especially when you get round after round of not being able to contest your own objectives. You start to fall behind in points very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
They are difficult to run alongside other shooting hammers. One of the problems with Tempestors is, they need all-out attack. Even though their breath weapons don't benefit from +1 hit, they still want it for their crossbows. So if you bring them as a squad of 2 alongside, let's say, a unit of 15 Judicators, just whatever example, the Judicators are going to get all-out attack. These guys are not going to get all-out attack, which means their damage is going to suffer a little bit. So if you're running multiple shooting units, you remember that you can only have 1 with all-out attack, and your list kind of has to be tailored to that. You can get around this with using a Torlon, for example, but it's a consideration you have to think about. Another downside of these guys, even though they move 10 inches and then they shoot 12 inches, the 12-inch shooting is actually a pretty big problem, because people can just put stuff behind their screens more than 9 inches from the front line, and you will not be able to shoot them at all, because you have to end your move more than 3 inches from the enemy, which means if your enemy puts important units more than 9 inches from the front line, the 9 and 3 is 12, you just cannot shoot them at all. So they can completely be protected, and that is a significant downside, because one of the things Stormcast love to do is kill the right target at the right time, and units like Long Strikes and Judicators are much better for that purpose.
And it matters that our Scions too. You can't just Scions them down and immediately hit something in a backline. You've got to hit what's in front of you fairly often.
Very easy to screen out their damage from Scions, from reserve deployments. They're also not that fast, even though they have decent melee damage that can go in and kill some screens and take up space. They're not like other melee units in Stormcast. We can't reliably charge them on turn 1 with only 10-inch move. And unlike other units in our army, which we might want to use Steadfast March on, Steadfast March means you can't shoot that turn. And giving up their shooting that's a big no-no. You got to shoot with these guys every turn to get their value. And I guess the last big downside of these guys is that against non-veteran units, like let's say a 3+ save stacking Maw Crusher, Tempestors aren't going to do much. Rend 1 is not very effective against that sort of scenario. And Rend 2 attacks on the mounts are nice, but not enough of them are going to get through to make a difference. And the Mortal Wound Breath is good, but unless you're running a big squad of 4 and comboing it with some other stuff, that's not going to be enough on its own. Whereas a unit like 6 Long Strikes or 15 Bow Judicators would have an easier time cutting through that particular profile. But they fit into just about any list. Bringing a squad 2 of these guys, bringing a squad of 4. We've made lists that include Tempestors as a primary melee hammer, which I think is a really cool thing you can do now in Season 1. So let's take a look at some unit combos we found that we really are enjoying. The first one here is Krondys. You guys want to talk about Krondys? Because I could go all day, so somebody else has to take this.
Go ahead, Dana.
All right. I have been running this list a couple times now. A good, pretty much every Sunday at my local meet, I run a Krondys list because I love playing him. It's a little tougher lately with Purple Sun around, but what makes Krondys work so well, besides crossbows helping out, it's actually the Tempestors that shine the most in the list. So between Atavistic Tempest and Purple Sun, you're getting a Rend 2 there. And then Geminids is giving you an effective extra Rend, because Geminids is stopping all out defense. So if you put all of that together, you can get to Rend 4 crossbows, which is an extremely good combo for cutting through even a Maw Crusher. Even Kragnos has to... Well, I mean, Kragnos can ignore with his spell shenanigans, but, even something on a native 2-up like a Idoneth Turtle. Something like that, a Bastiladon, has to worry about this combo. Really awesome thing, tech with that list, and it makes these Fulminators shine. And one of the cooler things about that list, you've got Krondys as a bit of a melee hammer in that list. You definitely have to leverage him. But the Bounty Hunters Battalion allowing the Tempestors to be a melee hammer for that list to cut through wounds is honestly what makes it work. I don't think it'll be as good of a list after Bounty Hunters for that purpose. It'll definitely lose a bit of steam from that, but such a cool list. I love running Krondys, and Tempestors is a really good way to capitalize on that.
Yeah, crossbows and Tempestors work really well with those spells in Krondys. What I like about Tempestors in that combo is that they can go into Bounty Hunters, like you said. And that gives you a secondary threat against these like big hordes of Nighthaunt and Fire Slayers. And even Daughters of Cain, you get 10 attacks with Krondys Tail, and then sometimes you want to charge in with a second unit to kill melee snakes behind them, and Tempestors are great for that purpose.
Also, the Unleash Hell into Horde armies, like even Lang, for instance. Once you Unleash Hell with Tempestors and Daughters of Cain, they're not charging you with whatever that...
Yeah, it's great. Rend 4 crossbows are fantastic. Definitely worth trying. Another fun thing to run with the Tempest, so one last note about the Rend 4 crossbows. We talked about how they're not good against save stacking, and that just obliterates that weakness, right? Like if you're using Tempestors in this archetype, they pretty much have everything's killable. There's nothing that the Tempestors can't kill. They turn into Fulminators effectively because their Rend gets so high and they have such a high volume of attacks. They just do so much damage, even against the highest save stuff. It's crazy. Really fun combo. Another way to run Tempestors that we've had success is to run them in small squads of 2 and buff them up with a Taurolon. The Taurolon has a +1 hit pulse effect from Comet Trail that lasts until your next hero phase, so he can buff a bunch of units and then they can move out and do things independently, and that effect lasts until your next hero phase, so you can use this to buff up a block of 4 Tempestors and then they keep that +1 hit when they use Unleash Hell later, or they can use it on both shooting and melee in the same turn, and then when they fight defensively they get to keep that as well. Taurolons are great with Tempestors, really good combo. It also works. This eliminates the one weakness we talked about, that it's difficult to use Tempestors with other shooting units, because the Tor alone can give multiple units +1 hit. So if you have, let's say, 3 long strikes, 10 crossbow adjudicators, and 2 units of Tempestors, you can give, with the right positioning, all of those units can get +1 hit, and that feels really, really good. It also saves you a bunch of command points because you're not using all out attack.
Mm-hmm.
Another very strong combo with Tempestors we found is the Knight Judicator. So Knight Judicators have 2 shots that deal 3 damage apiece, and they're very accurate. They're going to be on 3s and 2s with Rend 3, really, really potent. But their weakness has always been, stuff just has a lot more wounds than that. You're not going to deal enough wounds if you only bring Knight Judicators. You're not going to kill the enemy army. But what if Tempestors come in here with their high volume of Rend 1 shooting, and then you can stick them in Bounty Hunters so they can clear out these big hordes of zombies that you need to cut through, that the Knight Judicators would take 10 turns to kill, and you don't have that many turns of shooting. So that's an excellent combo. It doesn't get rid of a weakness of Tempestors, but it gets rid of a weakness of the Knight Judicators in particular. And this also works well with a Toralon. The Toralon can give all the Knight Judicators +1 hit, while also giving it to the Tempestors. It's a fantastic combo.
The thing about, like we mentioned about Tempestors, since all Stormcast Cavalry move 10 to 12 inches, I think the only things that move 12 inches are Stormstrike Chariots and Stormdrake Guard.
And the Dracolines.
And the Dracolines, yes. So Tempestors, the thing, like we mentioned, they don't need to necessarily complete a charge in order to generate value. They can just move up and keep providing support fire. And let's say you don't complete a charge because it was a long, like 9-inch long bomb charge or something. Well, it's fine. You can pass the turn to them, and if they come to you in melee, the Unleash Hell is going to do a fair bit of damage before they even engage. And they're tough. 12 wounds. They have 3 up save, 2 up with all-out defense. They're not going to go down to just like a tickle fighter. And they're because of their movement and because of their multi-phase value, you can threaten enemy flanks and harass them pretty easily. You can use these to harass backfield objective holders, but also have the movement next turn to then go on and kind of pincer them from different angles if you want them to. Supporting other charges, so you could use these to absorb charges for something else, or just add that little bit of extra melee damage to finish something off. You can deny space because you can place these sideways. They're on these large I believe they're on the 90mm cavalry bases.
Yep, they're big.
Yep, the big ones, the big cavalry bases. Yeah, so when you place these guys horizontally in coherency, you can actually form a really, really decent screen, one that can unleash hell and generate value for you again, which is what, if it's going to absorb a charge, you're going to generate value as it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all in all, a pretty, very, very versatile cavalry.
Yep. They can also, in a pinch, they can be the unit that absorbs Unleash Hell so that your Fulminators or your other melee hammer can do the damage they need. They can charge in alongside your other melee hammer and then get in the way of units that would pile in towards them. So let's say you're fighting like a large block of 20 ghosts or something. You could charge in Fulminators on one side and then put in Fulminators on one side and then put 2 Tempestors, and like you said, put them sideways. And then the ghosts, can't really get to the Fulminators. They end up fighting the Tempestors instead. So you might lose the Tempestors in that situation, but you've protected your much more valuable unit. So in a pinch, they can do that, which is really nice.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to need. I really like that the Tempestors can keep up with the other cavalry, especially since sometimes you're using crossbows and you're using all these units, and sometimes you don't have translocate. Either you've lost your relictor, or you want to use it on another piece. You want to be able to move around the battlefield with other things. I like that Tempestors get to keep up, and they're independent. That's just the coolest thing about them. We talked about all these Tempestor unit combos, and they're really good combos to lean into and to build around, but you don't have to, which is, I think, one of the coolest things about them. I think one of my favorite little I kind of tried this because I thought it was really cool is, if you want to try playing something like a Nylon Grande and you don't necessarily have like Storm Drakes or Chariots for that kind of pinning slot, if you will, for the list, where you want something that's more mobile that can go out and be a bit higher wounds, mostly the mobility. Tempestors can kind of slot in there. I mean, they're a 3-up save with 6 wounds each model, so they still fulfill a lot of the roles there, and it's another shooting piece, which is always good to have. So I think it's cool that Tempestors, they just slot in. That's kind of one of the best things. Like, you can't just slot in Fulminators sometimes.
Yeah, because sometimes you've already got enough melee units, but you can never have too much shooting. But like almost never. Like you want a mix of melee and shooting, right? But like more melee isn't as easy to slot in as more shooting is.
I think that's one of the coolest things about the Corondus list is that it's actually a shoot cast list.
Pretty much, yeah. The Great Hunt too features the
Yeah,
Night
the Great Hunt.
Judicators and Toralon, and the 4 block of Tempestors fits right in there. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that wraps up our video on why you should use Tempestors. We want to give a special shout out here to our new sponsor, Kaiju Gaming Lounge in Orlando, Florida. Their partnership is going to allow us to host new painting contests and start producing some Stormkeep themed merchandise. We've had a lot of requests for that over time. So check out our Discord server for more information about this, including the new painting contest, which just started this week. And check out a video description for a link to their Kickstarter campaign. Dan, you're actually good friends with Carl, the owner of Kaiju Gaming Lounge. You want to give him a shout out here?
Yeah, Carl's one of the leads there, along with the rest of the team. They're an amazing team. Being good friends with them, they truly want to make a good gaming space, and I'm really excited that we can support each other in our endeavors here. Their Kickstarter is going to help them create a really awesome space here, but also you can support them on collectiblesquids.com, which is their online front for the moment. Like I said, they're creating a very cool environment, and supporting them really does help support a lot more AOS players in the area and just around. Carl, for example, is going to be running things or helping running things over at Crucible, which is one of the big majors here in Southeast US. And he's been directly responsible for helping grow events, like literally more than doubling the amount of events in Florida. He's even helped me out. I'm going to be TOing my first event this weekend, and it's all because of his generosity and helping out. So the people behind this are very good and just community-driven people, and I really appreciate that kind of work.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm hoping I get a chance very soon to go visit the store once it's up. Once the Kickstarter finishes, all the renovations and everything are done. I'd love to go visit the store. It's going to be a good time. And that wraps it up for this episode. Thank you guys for watching. Leave a comment about why you love Tempestors or why you hate them and why we're stupid and wrong. Either way, it gets us more clicks, so go for it. And that'll do it for us. See you guys.
See you guys next.
Thanks, y'all.